Okay, so I just want you to please state your name and your title on camera for me.
My name is Jane Alway and I'm a psychotherapist.
All right, so how long have you been studying and interacting with people who suffer from eating disorders?
For myself, I would say for the last 4 or 5 years in practice, and then prior to that, it was an interest of mine, so I studied this when I was a graduate student, and I spent time writing papers, doing research on the topic.
Okay. So, on average, through your research and through your experience, would you say you associate more with females who have eating disorders or males?
I would say, for myself, I would say I would identify more with a female who has an eating disorder, partly, I guess, because I am female, and also because there's a lot more research available in terms of female eating disorders and various psychological conditions and issues that may be connected with a female developing an eating disorder. And there isn't that amount of research for males with eating disorders at all. It's a bit of a mystery.
Why do you think it is such a mystery?
I think that for the longest time, it's been considered to be a female disorder. And while it's true that 90% of sufferers are female, there's still 10% who are male. So if you consider, say, in the United States, and a lot of statistics come out of the US, in the United States about 8 million people have an eating disorder. 10% of those are males. And then the interesting layer on top of that is that we don't really know how many males have an eating disorder. We probably don't know how many females have an eating disorder or an issue with food, because unless it reaches significantly clinical difficulty where the person is either hospitalized or has identified to a family physician, it may go unknown or unchecked for quite a while. For males, because it is considered a female disorder, and there aren't a lot of people who have come forward, say, in the media to say I've struggled with and have overcome an eating disorder, let alone, say, somebody who's male having done that. It's something that males struggle with. I've had instances in which, say I'm running a group for people with eating disorders. It's quite typical that all the participants who come are female, and sometimes one male might show up, and the idea is, well, how comfortable are they in amongst a group of females? Mm-hmm. So it's, yeah.
Do you think men and women show symptoms of eating disorders differently, or do you think that they are all the same?
That's a good question. There have been some studies that would indicate that it may be a little bit different. For a lot of females who develop an eating disorder, they may have issues in terms of how they look, but may start out being at what would be considered a normal weight. For a lot of males who develop an eating disorder, as far as we know, a number of them will start out being overweight or somewhat overweight. So there's a bit of a difference there in terms of how it may develop.
Okay. So do you know if there is an eating disorder or a form of disordered eating that men are continuously experiencing more so throughout time?
In terms of percentages, from what we know, if you look at anorexia nervosa, which would be categorized as having a significantly low body weight, so below 85% of what would be considered healthy, or say bulimia, which would be usually normal body weight, and the person is purging or vomiting to get rid of food that's been consumed. Or if you look at binge eating disorder, say a third disorder, anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa tend to be much more heavily represented by females. With binge eating disorder, it's more of an even balance. There are theoretically still more females than males suffering from the disorder, but again, there's a huge amount of pressure in society, both on females and males, to conform to an ideal. But I guess if we could say something maybe that society still quote, accepts an overweight male a little bit more than perhaps an overweight female. And so somebody with binge eating disorder who's male, their symptoms may also go unchecked, unnoticed by friends, family for a much longer period of time, potentially.
Okay. Do you think there are any stereotypes of men who have eating disorders? I know you mentioned that it may be okay for a man in society to be a little bit more overweight, but what are the stereotypes of men who have eating disorders?
There is a stereotype which for some men will add to the stigma, unfortunately, but there's a stereotype that if a male has an eating disorder, that male is gay. You know, my hope for the future is that that isn't something that will be looked at in any way negatively at all, but for some men, they may feel that that's an additional barrier to coming forward because it will be presumed that they're gay if they have an eating disorder, which is not the case, may be the case, but not necessarily.
Why do you think such a stereotype exists in society? Why do you think, someone who is gay, if they were to have an eating disorder, or someone who has an eating disorder but isn't gay, why do you think those two work together hand in hand?
There may be the sense that if a male is gay, that there's a stereotype or perception that they may be more concerned with the way in which they look, but there's incredible pressure on everybody in society to conform to these unrealistic ideals, and elite athletes are often subject to those pressures. There's a lot of steroid use that goes on, unfortunately, with young people wanting to conform to those ideals that can also lead into disordered eating. So it's not necessarily something that affects any one category of people at all.
Okay. So I know that there are also stereotypes for females that exist for people who have eating disorders. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on those.
Yeah, the stereotype for a female with an eating disorder is typically somebody who's young, very perfectionistic, wanting to do really well, typically Caucasian, often thought of as being in ballet or dance, and again, this can be a barrier to other women receiving treatment or even being identified by a healthcare professional as suffering from an eating disorder, because there are females from all different cultural backgrounds who have an eating disorder. And there's also finding that increasingly middle-aged women are identifying as having an eating disorder, and that can be missed by healthcare professionals because of that stereotype that, well, this only happens to young Caucasian females, so they're not looking for older women of different cultural backgrounds, and they're not looking for males. Yeah.
What, if any, are the pressures that males face when it comes to, beauty, health, body image, and aesthetics? What do you think? What do you think they have to live up to?
Oftentimes, if you go to any magazine stand, there's just a barrage of images of guys who are photoshopped with these very, sort of six-pack ripped abs, and that there's this expectation sometimes that, especially young people looking at that every day, saying, okay, is that what I have to live up to? And I think there has to be a lot more attention to the idea that these images are not real. They're photoshopped, they're altered.
Okay. Are these pressures different from those that females face?
Yes and no. I mean, females, you could say there are more magazines perhaps for females, and females have had a particularly hard time in terms of the media. It's constant, but I think equally, it's becoming, I guess you could say, almost an equal opportunity type of pressure at this point.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think males are quieter about how they feel about these pressures?
I think that for males, and I would say this, not necessarily, I don't want to stereotype, but that in general there may be this feeling that I'm strong for keeping things inside. And that can, again, present a barrier to treatment. And yeah, it can make it harder for them to receive treatment or reach out for help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know of any all-male support systems that are in Toronto and the GTA, or are they both majority of the time co-ed?
I do know that Eating Disorders of York Region has attempted to run support groups for males who are experiencing eating disorders or issues with food. Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever heard of Thinspiration before?
Thinspiration?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on it?
Okay, if you're referring perhaps to these, they would refer to pro-Ana type
Right.
websites, really dangerous. These websites are adding to that pressure that young people have. If parents and friends are not aware that somebody who's struggling with food issues is going to these websites, that's obviously it's quite dangerous. And you know, these websites are basically designed to promote behaviors that can ultimately result in death. So obviously a horrible thing.
Do you think internet service providers should find a way to regulate these websites because they are so dangerous, or do you think that will just cause more problems?
I do believe in freedom of speech, but a lot of these websites are aimed at young people, and so I think that parents have to be aware of websites that their kids are visiting. I think that everyone in society and people in the media should be very connected with and attuned to promoting healthy eating and healthy living websites, and that there should be campaigns that are equally as out there to say, okay, look, these are the dangers of visiting these websites. So I think there has to be coming from teachers, healthcare providers, parents, just in society in general. And I think also to get away from the Thinspiration idea, magazines and the media using more people who are not photoshopped in their advertising would help.
Do you have any personal stories that you'd like to share working with people who have eating disorders that could maybe aid to the public's understanding of why people have eating disorders, or why males have eating disorders in general?
Yeah, I think what I would like to share is that there is a myth that an eating disorder is about vanity, or that's how it develops, and it's not. It's usually connected with issues of self-esteem, feeling not good enough, wanting to, in amongst a lot of changes in a person's life, wanting to control something, and then it's something that just kind of gets out of hand. It initially can appear to give a person control over something in their lives, and then can spin out of control, where the person will end up feeling like the eating disorder or the disordered eating behaviors is controlling them. Yeah, but help is available, and recovery is definitely possible.
Thank you. Do you have anything else to add?
I don't know that I do. That was really good.
That's great. Thank
That was
you so
really
much.
good.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, okay.
All right.